Greetings, I'm Princess Bussy, and I'm an instructional coach at Snellville Middle School in Gwinnett County Public Schools. While my role is primarily outside of the classroom, this year I piloted a reading intervention course and currently serve a small group of 8th grade students for one class period. Our school uses the iReady Universal Screener to determine Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 student groups. The purpose of the reading intervention course is to target Tier 2 students, students 2 grades below grade level reading, but is comprised of all tier groups. The 3-day literacy unit was based on the reading foundation of comprehension using a novel study of the science fiction text Divergent by Veronica Roth. The school provides iReady lessons for the intervention class. However, for the purposes of this lesson, I was granted approval for a novel study. In this 3K unit, students were able to analyze complex themes, evaluate dialogue that propels action in the story, and write informative text to examine and convey ideas about a text. The new strategy to be used was the comprehension strategy instruction method. Using this method involves explaining, modeling, practicing, and applying strategic processes to comprehending narrative, informational, and other texts. The following learning objectives were taught during the 3-lesson literacy unit. The students will be able to analyze how specific lines of dialogue within the plot of a story or drama propel the action, reveal aspects of a character, and provoke a decision. The students will be able to identify how characters' thoughts, feelings, and actions point to a story's theme. To establish a flow and understanding of a novel study, my students had an extensive overview of dystopian literature and societies prior to the 3 literacy lesson. We established the setting, plot, and conflict in Chapter 1, then began the lessons with Chapter 2. Students completed a character organizer to analyze character actions and organize their ideas in relation to their importance to the plot. Following the completion of the graphic organizers, students engaged in rich conversations, analyzing the impact of these character actions in relation to the developing plot. For students who struggled with making the connections, probing questions were used to aid in their comprehensions, and they were pulled in small groups for focused instruction on analyzing characterization, and character interactions. As we listened to the audio version, I stopped at critical points to think aloud about key plot details using these probing questions. Students were prompted to turn and talk, then share out their thoughts using evidence from the text. I noticed there was an increase in participation versus the iReady lessons during the read alouds. Students identified with either the characters, the communities fixed around the setting, and or the issues facing the protagonist, Beatrice Pryor. By day 2, students completed the Chapter 2 vocabulary and response questions. A middle school friendly online dictionary was attached to our Google Classroom to assist with the words. However, we stopped as we encountered the words. Students were encouraged to use the context and figurative and or connotative language to make meaning of the words, and I noted how many of them opted to do it this way rather than use the dictionary. While the questions were directly related to actions in the text, they also allowed for inputting their opinions based on their backgrounds and individual beliefs. These types of questions were critical throughout the 3-lesson literacy unit as they incorporated worldly views that will impact the emerging themes in the novel. We wrapped up day 2 listening to chapter 3 in preparation for the final day, and here are some of their sample responses to chapter 2. On the final day of learning, students completed an on-demand writing prompt to respond to. Students were allowed to choose one of the 3 following writing prompts using any materials, including the graphic organizers, any of the anticipation guides, the chapter responses used for the 3-lesson literacy lessons. Students were provided explicit instructions for writing informational text, a writing rubric, and writing format details prior to writing. Students had up to 45 minutes to type 3 to 5 paragraphs based on the prompt. Here is a sample represented by a Tier 1 student, a Tier 2 student sample, a Tier 3 student sample. Reflecting back on the lessons, using the comprehension strategy instruction method amplifies students' ability by explaining, modeling, and practice. Students were also able to articulate their understanding through meaningful discussions and then writing about topics related to the theme using details from the text and assess relationships between the text and broader world issues. Finally, my students were provided the opportunity to form in-depth analysis of issues that may impact them through themes related to a science fiction novel. I really enjoyed the 3-day literacy lesson, and currently we are continuing our novel study for Divergent.